joining, just quick disclaimer, this call is being recorded and we will place the recording in our YouTube channel. So if you're not comfortable with that, you can drop off now. So happy Friday. Our topic of discussion today is around some exciting Azure Service Bus updates. Um, so quick blurb about myself. I mean, if you don't know me, I just, and by the way, I will share the slide deck. You should look at the link in the description field. That's where we have the slide deck link. One other thing is there is a azurepowerlunch.com. If you want to know about upcoming sessions, just check that site. We have upcoming sessions, and if there is any session cancellation, because it has happened in the past, and I apologize for that, where a session was canceled and people did not know about it. So just okay. So it's few updates that we're gonna be covering in Service Bus. It has now support for private endpoints. It has the ability from the portal to send, receive messages, receive messages, things like that, which kind of allows you to test quickly instead of like creating your own client and putting it together. Support for JMS 2.0, and also encryption with customer managed keys. And we're going to take a look at each of them. First of all, just want to spend a few minutes on Service Bus. If you are not aware of Azure Service Bus, it's one of the probably the first services that came along when Azure Cloud was launched. It's a message broker in the cloud. Support scenario like queuing, allow you to decouple application, publish subscribe model through topics and subscription. So that's what it does. Quick idea about construct. So you have to create a namespace. That's the main thing, and you create other entities under that namespace. The namespace has to be globally unique. Those namespaces can have multiple queues and topics inside it. What is a queue? Queue is just as a name suggests, it's a messaging construct where you send messages, a sender can send messages, and another receiver can receive messages. So basically what it does is it allows you to, as I said, decouple application where an app is sending messages to process for example, you have orders coming in, you send orders to these orders as messages into a queue, and on the other side, order processing service is processing those orders. So let's say if you have to take that service offline, you don't miss any order because they still stays in the queue. Topics are, think of it, they're slightly different than queues. They're more of a pub sub model. So a topic, you can only send messages to it. You have to create a subscription on that topic to receive messages. So you can have multiple subscription, and each subscription will get its own copy of the messages, and you can put criteria what messages you like or don't like, or what messages you don't want to receive. So that's how this thing works. Just quick refresher on Service Bus construct. SKUs, this is where things get kind of a little more interesting, in a sense that pricing discussion and feature. So initially when Service Bus started, we have the basic and standard SKU. Both of these SKU have kind of more of pricing based on how many messages that you use. With the premium SKU, there is a fixed price under which you have a certain size of messages that are covered. Okay, premium SKU is a dedicated SKU. So basically, you are not impacted by a noisy neighbor. So it can happen with basic and standard, that if you are um, uh, using the service bus standard or basic queue, and there is another tenant which is using the same and they have a higher throughput, it may or may not impact your throughput as well. So this is called a noisy neighbor issue. Premium SKU, it is basically you get your own tenant kind of, and you have a what you call a you get resource isolation, you get your own tenant, what we call a messaging unit, and with that you can you can rest assured that you are the only one using it, so there is no issue with of what we call noisy neighbors. So that's the premium SKU. And some of the features that we're going to be talking about, they're only applicable to the premium SKU. And what I would suggest is, if you are using occasionally a service bus messaging, maybe just a kind of a decoupling between two applications, the message load is not very high, you may be may want to go with basic or standard. I mean, that may work for you. But if your application relies on messaging and makes a heavy use of it, different components rely on it, I think you may want to look at premium messaging, because if you, based on our calculation, what we have seen is, if you pass certain messaging load, premium SKU gives you a better, um, price to value ratio. Okay. So first of all, service bus with private link. So private link, as you know, it's a platform level service which allows you to expose PaaS services as well as third-party services over private endpoints. So you may have a PaaS service like storage or Azure SQL, which has a public FQDN. You can access that service over private endpoint. That's what private link service allows you to do. And once again, Azure Service Bus now supports private link, and you can expose Azure Service Bus endpoints over private IP. Once again, this is a premium feature. It is only supported for premium SKU only. So you when you create a service bus SKU, it has to be premium to support private endpoint. So just wanna, and these are some of the things that you have to be aware of, that may not work with if you go with private endpoint, because once you use private endpoint, the uh, some of the access with the Azure, some of the other services may or may not work. So you have to be aware of that. So for example, if you want app service to access service bus messages from private link or functions, things like that, and you want to use like what we call web jobs or function triggers, they have to be on that virtual network where you have created that endpoint. Otherwise, those triggers may not work. Okay, so just keep that in mind. What scenarios it open with this service bus private endpoint? So let's say you create a service bus and messages are being sent to it from your partner, from other third party customers, or I mean, they're just sending those messages and to your topics and subscriptions. What you can do is you can create a private endpoint into your workload VNet. And by the way, once it's in a workload VNet or VNet in Azure and it is connected to on-prem, you can access that service bus endpoint on-prem. So if you are running, application on-prem, which are accessing that service bus through that endpoint, so now it's like they're using a local messaging infrastructure, on-premise messaging infrastructure. They don't have to go over the internet or over a public FQDN to access that service bus. Okay, so this is kind of once again, allow you to do that message exchange across network boundaries. Before, a number of organizations did not like that you have to, in order to access, service bus, you have to go over a public FQDN or they have to open certain ports. But with this one, no ports or extra ports are needed. Basically, what you're doing is you're creating a private endpoint in a VNet, which is connected to your on-prem. So now you can access that messaging endpoint from your on-prem server, just like you are doing a local messaging infrastructure. Any questions? And by the way, we're going to do a quick demo and take a look at that as well. Okay. So moving forward, Service Bus Explorer. So if you have played with Service Bus, I'm sure you have heard about Service Bus Explorer tool. It was a third-party tool developed by, I think from one of the Microsoft, team members, and it was popular. People were using it instead of writing their own tool to kind of send receive messages to test out. This was definitely not meant for any production scenario, but just for test out and use as a reference guide to create their own application. So now a lot of functionality of that tool, and by the way, it's not the same tool, the name is the same, of whatever some of the functionality was there, it has now been moved to Azure portal. And we will take a look at that in a second. Okay. This is how the UI looks like. And last but not the least, JMS is a popular messaging standard. That's how kind of a number of services communicate with each other in the open source world. And Azure Service Bus had support for JMS 1.1. With premium tier, we now support have a preview for JMS 2.0 support. So a lot of things that were not supported or partially supported, now they're supported with Service Bus premium tier. So what that allows you to do is you can have a application that is kind of using JMS 2.0 and using something like you know um, any JMS service, and you want to take advantage of Azure. What you can do is you can replace that with Azure Service Bus, and with AMQP, you will have that JMS 2.0 support there. So kind of without changing any code or with minimal changes, you just have to change the configuration settings. You should be able to support Azure Service Bus with your application. So that's kind of a very powerful thing that you can do with Azure Service Bus now. So it's time for demo. So let's take a look at it. First of all, let's kind of talk about creating a service bus namespace, Azure Service Bus. Okay. So once we create it, that's where the SKU I was referring to, premium. That's the, and if you look at other ones, they're basic and standard, but the premium is the one which supports private endpoint, supports customer managed key encryption, and supports JMS 2.0 standard. So these are the few things which are supported by that particular SKU. Okay, so with that, I have already created a JMS service. So let's go back here, and this is the name of the service. So this service bus is already there. What I can do is I can go into networking, and this is how I can, block traffic. So as you can see right now, I'm using selected network. So I'm not allowing any other network to connect. There is no availability. The only network address that I'm allowing is my home address, which is kind of my work from home address. This is outbound IP address of my router that I'm using. Okay. In terms of private endpoint, I have created a private endpoint. Experience for creating private endpoint is very similar. Basically, you go in and you pick up where you want to create that private endpoint. I can, let's say, go into, let's say if I can go into West US 2 resources, I can pick up, and I have to pick up Service Bus here. And the sub resource is going to be namespace. By the way, if you pick up a standard namespace, it will error out. It will have to be premium, okay? And then I can pick up, you know, what subnet I want to create that service endpoint and all that. And once I do review and create, it's going to create an endpoint. I'm not going to create an endpoint. I already have one. So let's go back here and let's see. Okay, there is. Yeah. So this is my service bus, and what I'm going to do is, and these are the I mean, one of them is already created, the other one will be created soon. In any case, this is the private service bus experience. So this endpoint right now is in a VNet where I have created a virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump on that virtual machine. So you will see me going to remote desktop. So this is the virtual machine that I have where which is connected to my on-prem, which is connected to the VNet where I have created a service bus endpoint. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go in here and I'm going to just do an NS lookup for that service bus name. And as you can see, this is showing a 10 dot address, which is a local VNet address. So it is connecting to service bus over that address. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing I want to show you is I have a Java client running here, Java application. So this is the application that I'm running. And what I'm going to do is I am going to start that application. So while this application is running, so it is monitoring a queue that I have created. And so let's go back here and look at the queues. I have this JMS queue that I have created. I'm going to go in that. And here you will see Service Bus Explorer. Okay. And that's what allows us to kind of send, receive messages without kind of writing a client. You can send, you can receive, you can peek. And just want to tell you about this particular app is now monitoring that particular queue. And as soon as a message is published, it's going to print out here on the screen, on the console. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick this. Okay, so I'm just going to send this text and I'm going to say send. So now the message is sent here. Let's go back to the remote desktop. This is the message here. Okay, so just think of it. Service Bus is running in Azure multi-tenant environment. It's a premium Service Bus SKU. I have created a queue over there. I have created a private endpoint to that Service Bus namespace. Please keep in mind, you don't create a private endpoint to a queue or a topic. You create to the entire namespace. Okay, so I have created a private endpoint which is connected to a VNet where this VM is running. So this VM that I have is running in that virtual network. So that VM, I'm running a Java application which is kind of polling that queue. And as those messages come in, it is printing that message here. So the point I want to convey is that your connectivity to that service bus is happening at inside the VNet over a private endpoint, no longer over an FQDN. Okay, that connectivity is blocked. You cannot access it over an FQDN. The only way I can send message from that portal is because I have opened a special firewall rule for my home router. That's it. If I take that rule out, I won't be able to send message from the portal itself. Okay. Any questions?
There's a question on the chat. I believe
Go ahead.
Naveed, you just answered that. That
Okay.
enabling private endpoint will remove public endpoint access from the service bus.
That's right. So, by the way, just thank you for bringing it up, man. So just keep in mind that I have to do selected networks. If I keep all networks, it will have both public and private access. So just keep in mind, once you enable private endpoint, go back there and enable select networks and block all access. Unless until you need both public and private, which you may, because you may have some customer who are sending messages, outside customer sending messages over service bus, but it would be a better idea to whitelist those IP address or things, and handle them that way instead of just opening it to all networks. So that's what I would recommend. Okay. So with that, any other questions on the private endpoint? Okey-doke. And just want to go back to the queue itself and just want to show one more time the UI. So Service Bus Explorer, I mean, it has a receive UI as well, where you can receive messages either from the queue itself or dead letter, or you can peek messages. Where peek messages is you just look at the message, you don't read it. That's the metaphor. So what I can do is I can just stop this thing here. So it's no longer receiving messages, and I can send a message here and then peek on it. So once again, let's do this. So I just sent the message, and if I want to do peek, yes, so there is this message. I can peek on it. So this is the message property. So I mean, nothing much, but it gives you a quick way to test your apps. Test your queue and set up from the portal instead of like creating an app. So just ease of use. You can quickly start going with the queue, so to make sure that you are actually sending messages back and forth. Okay, so now let's take a look at the encryption piece. So you can support customer managed keys. Just keep in mind, this is something you want to do as soon as you create the namespace, before you have any queues or topics in it, because this has to be happened when your namespace is created. Otherwise, so for example, if I try to do it now, it will ask me what key vault I need to use. Do we have any keys? Yes, I have a key there. I can select that key. And once I do that, if I try to save it, it's gonna give me an error saying that there are resources already in the namespace. So you have to do it on a namespace where there are no resources there. It should be completely empty before you start creating resources like topics, queues, subscription attracts, etc. But it has to be done at that point. What you will need is a key vault with a key in it. Okay, that's all you need. Once you do that, now your encryption is driven through customer managed keys, and it is delivered through the integration between Service Bus and Key Vault, and it's now you are in control of that encryption. One more thing to remember, once again, this is only supported from premiums for premium SKU. It is not supported for standard or basic SKU. Okay, any questions? So quickly on the JMS side, there is now a separate library that you have to use JMS Service Bus 2.0. There are kind of bits and pieces of samples, but there I couldn't find a kind of a end-to-end sample showing the support. But there's Service Bus SDK is there, and how you can use it from a Spring Boot. That's there as well. But that's a separate SDK. This is not the same SDK we have for JMS 1.1. So if you are planning to move from that, you will have to use that SDK. And the links are in the resources, and you will get it once you get the slide deck. Okay. So we have 2 minutes. Any final questions, comments, feedback? And once again, folks, please email us if you have any topics that you want us to talk about, or if you have a comments, feedback, happy to know more about it. And with that, I will give everybody 2 minutes back. Look forward to see everyone in and next week, another Azure Power Lunch session, and happy Friday.
Thanks, Naveed.
Thank you.
Stay safe, guys.
Thank you, Naveed.
Thank you, Naveed.